The Hex of the Bell Witch Part 1, The First Whispers. There is a story whispered in the hollows of Tennessee, a story that has survived for more than 2 centuries. Even today, locals lower their voices when they speak of it, as though the very air might be listening. They call it the Bell Witch haunting. To some, it is a tale of superstition and fear, a relic of rural folklore. But according to early testimonies, sworn affidavits, and newspaper accounts, something real, something violent, terrorized a family in Adams, Tennessee, beginning in 1817. It began not with thunder, nor with fire, but with whispers in the dark. According to official records, John Bell was a respected farmer, a man of discipline and God-fearing faith. He and his family lived on a patch of fertile land along the Red River. Their neighbors described them as ordinary, hard-working people, churchgoers who valued honesty and modesty. Yet behind the walls of the Bell home, a force began to move. Slow at first, almost shy, then bold, then merciless. The first signs were small. Scratching sounds at night, faint but persistent. The creak of footsteps across the floorboards when no one was awake. John dismissed them as rodents in the walls or shifting beams of the house. But in time, the sounds grew sharper, louder, impossible to ignore. One evening, the Bell children awoke screaming. They claimed something invisible had pulled at their bedclothes, tugging them from sleep. One child insisted that a cold hand had brushed across her cheek. From then on, there was no peace in the house. The scratching became gnawing. The footsteps turned into stomping, as though heavy boots marched inside their walls. The children reported their hair being yanked, their skin pinched by unseen fingers. And as the days passed, a voice began to emerge from the chaos. At first, it was only a whisper, too faint to understand, but night after night it returned, until words formed. "John Bell," it hissed. Neighbors were invited to witness the disturbances. According to affidavits recorded years later, they too heard the voice. It sang hymns from memory, quoted scripture, and mocked those who prayed aloud. It laughed with an unholy shrillness that no human throat could produce. What terrified them most was the intelligence of the voice. It answered questions, repeated conversations spoken in other rooms, and predicted events before they occurred. The entity claimed to be a spirit, one bound to torment the Bell family. Its reasons varied. Sometimes it declared vengeance against John Bell himself. Other times it claimed loyalty to Lucy Bell, John's wife, treating her with kindness while abusing the others. When asked its name, the voice offered many answers. But the one that endured in local memory was Kate. The neighbors began calling it the Bell Witch. Some believed it was the restless soul of a murdered woman. Others insisted it was the work of witchcraft, a curse placed upon John Bell after a dispute over land. Still others thought it was the devil himself, come to mock the piety of a church-going family. Whatever it was, it did not stay confined within the Bell house. Word spread throughout Robertson County, and soon hundreds of people claimed to have heard the witch's voice. Ministers traveled to witness it. Politicians came to see for themselves. Even Andrew Jackson, then a general and later president of the United States, is said to have visited the Bells in 1819. According to one account, Jackson's men camped near the Bell home, skeptical of the tales. But before the night was through, their wagons refused to move as though held in place by an invisible force. A voice mocked them, declaring it would torment them all before morning. Jackson himself reportedly exclaimed, "By the eternal boys, this is an old witch." Whether the story is true or not, it appeared in print decades later, and by then the Bell Witch legend had taken root in the American imagination. But what made this haunting unlike so many others was not just the noise, nor the violence, nor even the talking spirit. It was the slow, deliberate destruction of John Bell himself. The witch declared her purpose openly. She intended to kill John Bell, and over the years that followed, his health began to fail. He was struck with mysterious seizures, his tongue swelling until he could not speak, his throat constricting until he could not breathe. Physicians were baffled, unable to explain the attacks. Each time he suffered, the witch's voice rang through the house, laughing, mocking, sometimes imitating his choking gasps with cruel delight. Meanwhile, his daughter Betsy suffered her own torment. She was pursued by a young man named Joshua Gardner, and though her parents approved of the match, the witch did not. Whenever Betsy agreed to courtship, The voice would shriek in her ears, her bed shaken violently, her hair torn out by invisible hands. It warned her never to marry Joshua. Terrified, Betsy eventually broke off the engagement. The witch's laughter filled the house for days afterward. The hauntings escalated. Neighbors who came to witness the events claimed to be slapped, scratched, or pushed by invisible hands. Horses were found tangled and nearly strangled in their bridles. Candles extinguished themselves. Bibles were hurled across rooms. And always the witch spoke, taunting and jeering, sometimes weeping, sometimes quoting scripture, sometimes predicting tragedy. According to Marjorie Towns, a local schoolteacher whose notes survive, the witch's voice grew so clear that it was indistinguishable from a human standing in the room. One man even swore he carried on a 2-hour conversation with it, debating theology and politics. The entity seemed to know everything, to hear everything, to never sleep, and yet, despite the horror, some believed. Lucy Bell, the matriarch, was treated with respect by the witch. When Lucy fell ill, the spirit brought comfort, singing to her in the night, promising to protect her. To many in the county, it seemed the witch bore a specific hatred for John and perhaps for him alone. But why? That is the question that has haunted historians for 2 centuries. Some say John Bell cheated a neighbor named Kate Batts, a woman who accused him of swindling her in a land deal. They claim she cursed him before God and man, and that her spirit returned to make good on her vow. Others suggest John was guilty of darker crimes, whispers of abuse, of family secrets buried beneath the veneer of respectability. If true, the witch may not have been an intruder at all, but the very voice of vengeance made manifest. Officially, history records that John Bell died on December 20th, 1820. His family found a strange vial of liquid near his bedside, the contents of which he had ingested the night before. When tested on a cat, the animal died instantly. The witch's voice rang out triumphantly. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night. He'll never get up again." The death of John Bell remains the only case in American history where a spirit was officially blamed for a man's murder. His obituary acknowledged the rumors, his neighbors swore to the testimony, and the Bell Witch legend was sealed. But what if the story is not so simple? Some believe the liquid was poison placed by human hands, the witch merely a convenient mask for murder. Others argue that mass hysteria infected the entire county, producing hallucinations and delusions that reinforced themselves until no one could tell truth from fantasy. And yet documents remain. Written testimonies from ministers, farmers, children, even soldiers, all claiming they heard the voice, all claiming they felt the touch of unseen hands. If it was hysteria, why did it last for years? If it was fraud, who gained from sustaining it? If it was imagination, how did so many minds share the same nightmare? The witch's voice lingered after John Bell's death, sometimes quiet, sometimes shrill. It promised to return in 7 years, and according to records, it did. John Bell Jr. claimed to have been visited by the entity again, conversing with it for weeks about the past, present, and future. Then it vanished once more, promising to return in 107 years. By that measure, the Bell Witch should have returned in 1935. Some say she did. Local papers reported strange happenings near the old Bell property. Lights in the fields, whispers in the woods, farm animals found mutilated. But the reports faded, as they always do, into rumor and shadow. And so the Bell Witch story endures. It is more than folklore. It is a case with witnesses, affidavits, official records, and even death attributed to a spirit. It is a haunting that crossed the line between the invisible and the historical, blurring the boundary between myth and truth. But this is only the beginning. For the deeper one digs into the Bell Witch legend, the darker the soil becomes. There are stories rarely told, suppressed testimonies, and secrets buried with the Bell family themselves. And if one listens carefully, beneath the rustling of the Tennessee trees, some say the whisper can still be heard. The Hex of the Bell Witch. Part 2, The Roots of the Curse. The Bell Witch legend has often been told as though it began in a vacuum, a sudden eruption of the supernatural upon an unsuspecting family. But no curse arrives without a shadow, and no haunting endures without roots sunk deep in soil, watered by fear, resentment, and secrecy. To understand the haunting of the Bell family, one must look not only at what happened inside their farmhouse in 1817, but at what simmered around them in the years leading up to it. For Tennessee in the early 1800s was no quiet frontier. It was a land of disputed borders, bitter rivalries, and whispers of witchcraft already etched into the hills. John Bell had not always been a Tennessean. He was born in North Carolina in 1750, a man of the old soil. He married Lucy Williams in 1782, and together they raised children in the Cape Fear region. By all accounts, he prospered there. But prosperity has a way of drawing eyes, and enemies followed close behind. In 1804, John uprooted his family and traveled westward, seeking fresh land along the Red River in Robertson County, Tennessee. The land he acquired was fertile, but not without dispute, for neighbors whispered of a woman named Kate Batts, whose property bordered the Bell Farm. She was known in the community for her temper and her sharp tongue, but also for her misfortunes. Some accounts say she was eccentric, even unstable, perhaps suffering from what we would now call a disability. Others believed she trafficked in strange arts, that she was no stranger to charms, spells, and old-world superstitions. According to later testimony, Kate accused John Bell of cheating her in a land deal. The details remain obscured by time. Whether it was a boundary dispute, an underpaid note, or a question of livestock, no one can say for certain. But what is clear is that Kate swore vengeance. Some claimed she muttered dark words over John's name, calling upon God, or perhaps something else, to punish him. The testimonies paint a chilling picture. A minister named James Gunn claimed to have heard the witch recite entire sermons he had delivered in other counties, word for word, though no one from the Bell home had been present. Another visitor described how the witch revealed a secret he had spoken only to his wife in private, humiliating him in front of neighbors. How could such things be explained? Was it eavesdropping carried on by neighbors who despised John Bell? Was it clever ventriloquism by one of the children, perpetuated as a cruel family hoax? Or was it something far older, a force with knowledge beyond human comprehension? Some modern researchers point to the religious climate of the time. The Second Great Awakening had swept across America, filling towns with fiery sermons and apocalyptic warnings. In this atmosphere, belief in spirits, both holy and unholy, ran rampant. Entire communities were primed to see the devil's hand in every misfortune. In such soil, the witch found fertile ground. Yet the Bell Witch case stands apart from mere hysteria because of its sheer endurance. For years, the family was plagued nightly, and for years, outsiders were invited to witness it. Hundreds claimed to have heard the voice. Could hysteria sustain itself across so many people, across so much time? Or was it something more? The curse, if that is what it was, seemed to burrow itself into the very marrow of the Bell household. Betsy Bell, John's youngest daughter, bore the brunt of it. According to her own later testimony, she was beaten by invisible hands, red welts appearing across her body. She was dragged from her bed, choked until her lips turned blue. No child could endure such treatment without scars, both seen and unseen. It is from this quarrel that many believe the haunting sprang. To the townsfolk, the explanation was simple. Kate Batts had cursed John Bell, and her spirit, whether in life or in death, took the form of the witch that tormented him until his dying breath. Yet, curiously, there is no record that Kate Batts died before the haunting began. In fact, by most accounts, she lived until 1847, nearly 30 years after John Bell's death. This raises a chilling question. If the witch was Kate's spirit, how could she have been alive at the time? Unless, of course, what people encountered was not her ghost, but her will, her malice carried on the air like poison, an extension of her living hatred, made manifest in the Bell home. Others suggest that Kate Batts was never the witch at all. Her name, they argue, was a scapegoat, an easy label placed upon a woman already disliked by her neighbors. By this theory, the witch used her name as a mask, a convenient disguise, knowing the community would eagerly blame her for the torment. After all, who better to accuse than the strange widow next door, already whispered about in the churchyard? And yet, the witch did not confine herself to the name of Kate. In conversations recorded by neighbors, the entity gave many identities. At times, she claimed to be the spirit of a Native American whose grave had been disturbed on the Bell property. Other times, she declared herself a demon straight from hell, mocking those who prayed for deliverance. Most unsettling of all were the occasions when she claimed to be many spirits, bound together, unified in torment. If true, the Bell family was not haunted by one voice, but a chorus. Her relationship with Joshua Gardner, the young man she hoped to marry, became a target of the witch's cruelty. Every time Joshua courted her, the house erupted with shrieks. The voice mocked them both, warning Betsy she would know misery if she married him. At night her bed would tremble violently and her dreams filled with ghastly visions. Unable to endure the torment, Betsy broke the engagement. Her decision, whether coerced by fear or commanded by unseen force, shattered her spirit. She would never marry Joshua. But the witch's rage was not equally distributed. For reasons never understood, Lucy Bell was spared. Indeed, she was treated almost tenderly. When Lucy fell ill, the witch's voice promised she would recover, and on more than one occasion, Lucy reported hearing the entity sing to her softly in the night. Food placed near her bedside remained untouched by the witch, though the same food placed for others would be thrown to the floor. Why Lucy? Why was she favored while her husband and daughter were brutalized? Some have speculated that Lucy held secrets of her own, that she knew the cause of the curse, and the witch honored her silence. Others claim the spirit's affection was genuine, that Lucy alone was pure, and therefore exempt from punishment. Whatever the reason, the contrast between Lucy's protection and John's destruction fueled rumors that the witch's true grievance was with John himself. And indeed, John Bell's suffering worsened. His seizures grew more frequent. He would fall to the floor, unable to speak, his eyes wide with terror as though something unseen stood over him. At times his jaw would lock, preventing him from swallowing or speaking, while the witch's laughter echoed around the room. The family doctor could find no explanation. The torment grew so severe that John withdrew from public life. Neighbors who once respected him began to whisper. Some said he had sinned in secret, and the witch had come to expose him. Others believed he had crossed into forbidden dealings, contracts, debts, perhaps even oaths to powers he could no longer control. The truth, if there was one, remained locked behind John Bell's failing eyes. It was during this time that the witch's proclamations grew bolder. She told visitors she had been sent by God to punish John Bell. She announced openly that she would kill him. "He will die," she said, "and I will be there." No one could stop her. The haunting, already infamous across Tennessee, now became a matter of fascination beyond the state. Travelers came from as far as Kentucky and Virginia to hear the witch's voice. Ministers tried to exorcise it, but the entity mocked their efforts, reciting their prayers back at them in twisted, mocking tones. Politicians sought to disprove it, only to leave humbled and pale, admitting they had heard what should not be heard. And in 1819, Andrew Jackson himself came. The story, though debated, is etched into the folklore of the South. Jackson, a man hardened by war, skeptical of superstition, arrived with his men to confront the witch. But before his wagons reached the Bell home, they froze, their wheels sinking as though trapped by unseen force. Horses reared and would not move. A voice rang out cackling, "Go on, General, and we shall see what you are made of." Jackson reportedly declared, "By the eternal, boys, this is an old witch." That night, his men claimed to hear footsteps pacing their tents, a phantom hand tearing at their blankets. By morning, Jackson left in haste, declaring he would rather fight the entire British Army than face the Bell Witch again. Whether every detail of Jackson's visit is true, the story spread like wildfire, and with it, the legend grew. The witch was no longer a private tormentor. She had become a public figure, a voice known across the South, feared and discussed in taverns, pulpits, and courts alike. But as the haunting deepened, the mystery only widened. Who or what was the Bell Witch? Was it Kate Batts, as some believed, living or dead? Was it a demon clothed in scripture and blasphemy alike? Or was it the very land itself, restless from blood spilled long before John Bell ever set foot upon it? And most haunting of all, why did the entity vow so relentlessly to destroy John Bell, and only John Bell? The answers, if they exist, would be carved in blood and silence in the months to come. The Hex of the Bell Witch Part 3, The Death of John Bell. By the year 1820, the torment in the Bell household had reached its peak. For 3 years the family had lived under the suffocating shadow of the witch, enduring nightly assaults, public humiliation, and the slow unraveling of John Bell's body and mind. According to official records and sworn testimonies, the voice never wavered in its promise. John Bell must die. The man who had once been a respected farmer and patriarch of the community was now a withered shadow of himself. His neighbors, who once sought his advice and praised his success, avoided his gaze. The seizures had grown frequent, striking him at random. At times he would collapse in the fields, his tongue so swollen he could not call for help. At other times he sat rigid in his chair, eyes glassy, as though a presence unseen sat opposite him, staring until his will broke. According to one affidavit, John's lips were often found bruised and bitten, as if he had been forced into silence by something pressing against his jaw. His children described nights when his breathing would stop altogether, only for him to gasp back to life while the witch's shrill laughter echoed from every corner of the room. The family's desperation grew. Ministers were summoned in hopes of casting out the entity. They prayed, fasted, anointed the walls with oil, but the witch only mocked them, reciting their prayers back in distorted voices, sometimes mimicking the ministers themselves. One man, humiliated by the spirit's uncanny imitation of his speech, left the house trembling and refused ever to return. By autumn of 1820, John Bell could barely walk. His once strong frame was reduced to frailty. His speech slurred, his movements stiffened. It seemed as though his very body was turning against him. Physicians examined him but offered no remedy, no explanation. His decline was steady, unnatural, and merciless. Children grew up hearing of the witch. Farmers avoided the old Bell property, muttering prayers when they passed it. And deep in a cave near the Bell farm, a cave that still stands today, the echoes of the witch are said to linger. Locals call it the Bell Witch Cave, and even now, visitors report strange whispers in the dark, the sound of footsteps behind them, the brush of invisible fingers on their skin. The Bell Witch had claimed her first victim, but the curse she left behind was far from finished. For as long as people remember, they will ask, what was the Bell Witch? Was it a woman's curse, a demon from hell, a spirit of the land, or the collective terror of a community given voice? The truth remains buried in the red soil of Tennessee, alongside the bones of John Bell. But those who dare to listen closely say the answer is still whispering, carried on the night wind that blows through the hollow. In 1828, John Bell Jr. reported hearing the voice once again. Unlike before, there was no violence, no pinching or scratching or shrieking in the night. Instead, the voice spoke calmly, even reverently. For weeks, John Jr. carried on long conversations with the entity. It revealed secrets of the past, explained events in the county, and even spoke of far-off matters. Some say it predicted the rise and fall of nations, the Civil War, even disasters yet to come. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the witch vanished once more. But before leaving, it promised to return again, this time in 107 years. By that reckoning, the witch was due to return in 1935. Whether she did remains a matter of debate. Some locals claimed strange lights appeared in the fields near the old Bell property during that year. Others swore they heard whispering voices in the caves nearby, or footsteps trailing them in the woods. But no great torment arose, no family destroyed. Perhaps the witch had returned only to watch, to whisper, to remind the living that the curse was never truly gone. Even in the decades after John Bell's death, the legend refused to die. Newspapers carried stories of the witch into the late 19th century. Writers traveled to Robertson County to collect the testimonies, each account more unsettling than the last. In 1894, a man named Martin Van Buren Ingram published an authenticated history of the Bell Witch, compiling dozens of sworn statements and preserving the tale for posterity. It was Ingram's book that cemented the Bell Witch into American folklore. But it also raised questions. Could so many testimonies be fabricated? Were the affidavits genuine? And if they were, what had the Bell family truly endured? In the aftermath, the family tried to carry on, but the weight of the hauntings still pressed upon them. Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, remained a target. Though freed from the torment of her failed engagement, she continued to suffer physical assaults. Her health weakened, and she grew pale and withdrawn. Some neighbors claimed she would be seen wandering near the river, speaking aloud to unseen companions. Yet strangely, the intensity of the haunting began to lessen. The witch's voice, once nightly and unrelenting, grew less frequent. Weeks would pass in silence, then the voice would return briefly, shrieking or laughing, before fading again. According to later testimony, the witch declared that her purpose was fulfilled. John Bell was dead. But she promised she would not vanish forever. Before her departure, the witch made a chilling prophecy. She told the Bells she would return in 7 years' time. She would appear first to John Bell Jr., the eldest son, and there she would speak of the past, present, and future. And then, she said, she would depart again for a longer rest. The family lived in uneasy quiet during those 7 years. The farmhouse, once crowded with neighbors eager to witness the haunting, grew still. The children aged. Betsy Bell carried her silence with her, never fully recovering from her ordeal. Lucy Bell, now widowed, maintained her dignity, though whispers in the community never ceased. Some pitied her. Others believed she had known more than she ever admitted. And then, as promised, the witch returned. The witch announced openly that the end was near. "John Bell will never rise again," the voice proclaimed. "He belongs to me." On December 19, 1820, John Bell took to his bed, never to rise again. His family gathered around him in fear and sorrow. That night his son found a strange vial of liquid in the cupboard beside his father's bed. It was not medicine prescribed by any doctor, nor did anyone claim to have purchased it. Curious, the family tested the liquid by placing a drop on the tongue of the household cat. Within minutes, the cat convulsed and died. The witch's voice rang through the chamber, shrill and triumphant. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night. He'll never get up again." By morning, John Bell was dead. His family stood stunned, grief-stricken and horrified. They had expected torment, but not this finality. His funeral, held days later, was one of the largest gatherings the county had seen. Neighbors, friends, and curious onlookers crowded the burial ground to pay respects, or perhaps to witness the conclusion of a story that had gripped them for years. Ministers spoke solemnly of his passing, but even they could not ignore the murmurs. Had John Bell been murdered by poison? Had the witch herself administered it? Or had human hands used the witch as a mask for their crime? For as the mourners lowered John Bell's coffin into the earth, the witch did not remain silent. The voice was heard once more, rising above the prayers and hymns. According to dozens of witnesses, it sang loudly, drunkenly, mocking the funeral itself. The song continued, shrill and gleeful, until the last shovel of dirt was thrown over the coffin. The Bell Witch had claimed her victim. Some scholars dismiss the story as mass hysteria, born from religious fervor and rural superstition. They argue that the witch was nothing more than a product of fear, an idea that spread like a contagion until even the most rational minds swore they had heard her voice. Others suggest fraud, pointing fingers at members of the Bell family themselves. Perhaps Betsy, traumatized and desperate for attention, staged the events. Or perhaps John Jr. sought to discredit his father for reasons unknown. But these explanations falter when faced with the sheer volume of testimony. Hundreds of people claim to have heard the witch, from children to ministers to hardened skeptics. Could they all have been deceived? Could hysteria alone sustain a haunting for years? The darker theory persists, that John Bell was guilty of something terrible, and the witch was the instrument of justice. Some believe he had abused his daughter Betsy, and the witch was her subconscious cry for help, a manifestation of trauma so strong it took form in the waking world. Others believe he had cheated, swindled, or even killed, and the land itself rose against him in vengeance. According to official history, John Bell remains the only man in America whose death was attributed directly to a spirit. His obituary made no mention of the witch, but the people knew. The whispers carried through churches and town squares. A man had been cursed, and the curse had claimed him. And yet, the story does not end with John Bell's death. For the witch had not truly departed. She had only stepped aside, leaving behind a legacy of fear that seeped into the very soil of Tennessee. The hex of the Bell Witch Part 4 echoes through the century. After the voice fell silent in 1828, life in Robertson County tried to return to its quiet rhythm. The Bells, once the unwilling centerpiece of a nightmare, slipped gradually into the fabric of ordinary life. Yet the silence itself was not reassuring. For those who had heard the prophecy, the air seemed heavy with anticipation. The witch had sworn to return in 107 years, and in the gap between those years, the legend only deepened. Children grew up hearing the story whispered at firesides. Farmhands swore that if one lingered too long near the Bell property after dark, voices would rise from the fields. Low mutters at first, then distinct words, as though someone unseen walked just out of sight. Hunters reported their dogs stopping dead in their tracks at the edge of the Bell land, whining and refusing to go forward. According to affidavits preserved by later chroniclers, strange phenomena persisted in quieter form throughout the 1830s and 1840s. Neighbors would wake to the sound of pounding on their doors in the dead of night, only to open them to empty air. Others claimed to see lights in the woods, floating, flickering, sometimes darting away like a lantern carried by an invisible hand. Some said these were foxfire, natural phosphorescence in the damp ground. But to those who remembered the witch's voice, they were omens. Yet Ingram's work was not without controversy. Critics accused him of embellishment, of fabricating certain episodes to sell more copies. Some noted that his sources could not always be verified, that the affidavits were sometimes written in his own hand. But for those who had grown up in Robertson County, no book was necessary. They had heard their parents and grandparents speak of the witch. They had walked past the Bell land and felt the hair rise on their necks. What Ingram accomplished was to ensure that the Bell Witch legend would never fade into obscurity. It was now immortalized in print, sealed into American folklore. Still, the prophecy lingered. The witch had promised to return after 107 years, which meant the year 1935. As that year approached, whispers stirred once again in Adams, Tennessee. Farmers claimed their livestock behaved oddly, refusing to cross certain fields near the old Bell property. Children told stories of voices calling their names at dusk. In the cave, strange visitors claimed to hear faint singing, tuneless, distant, like a choir of voices far underground. One local historian recorded that in January of 1935, several townsfolk swore they saw a figure standing on the old Bell land at twilight. The figure was that of a woman, dressed in clothing not of their time, staring toward the farmhouse foundations. When approached, the figure vanished. Were these the delusions of a community eager to see a prophecy fulfilled? Or was the witch keeping her word, slipping back into the world for a fleeting moment to remind them that she had never truly left? According to official records, nothing catastrophic struck Adams in 1935. No family was destroyed, no patriarch poisoned. Yet the locals whispered that subtler things occurred. Marriages broken by sudden madness, children who claimed to be visited at night by a shadowed woman, farmers who swore their harvest turned sour overnight. The Bell children themselves carried scars. Betsy Bell, once a lively and promising girl, never recovered her full spirit. In 1824, she married a man named Richard Powell, a teacher who had courted her even during her engagement to Joshua Gardner. Some whispered that Powell himself had been involved with the witch's torment, that he sought to sever Betsy from Gardner and used dark knowledge to manipulate the haunting. There was never proof, only murmurs. Yet Betsy's life with Powell was quiet, and she seldom spoke of her childhood ordeal. Those who knew her said her eyes always carried a distant sorrow, as if she still heard voices no one else could. Lucy Bell, matriarch of the family, lived on until 1838. To her dying day, she maintained a dignified silence about the witch. But some visitors to her deathbed claimed that in her final hours she called out not for her children or her husband, but for the voice in the shadows. If true, it was never recorded beyond rumor. The broader community, however, could not forget. The tale of the Bell Witch spread beyond Tennessee, traveling by word of mouth across counties, then into printed pamphlets. By the mid-19th century, the story had gained a strange afterlife. Ministers thundered about it from pulpits, using it as proof of demonic forces. Skeptics dismissed it as a backwoods superstition, yet they repeated it all the same, unable to let it die. One element only deepened the dread: the Bell Witch Cave. The book presented itself as factual, a sober account backed by sworn testimony. In its pages were the names of witnesses, transcriptions of conversations with the witch, and descriptions of the torments the Bells endured. It was a sensation. Readers far beyond Tennessee were enthralled and horrified. The cave sits on the former Bell property, a gash in the limestone bluff near the Red River. Even in daylight, it feels oppressive. Cool air drifts out in steady breaths, carrying the scent of damp stone. Local children dared one another to enter, but few lingered. Strange sounds were reported within, scratches on the rock, faint laughter, the echo of footsteps where no one walked. According to one oft-repeated tale, a group of boys exploring the cave in the mid-1800s wedged themselves into a narrow passage. Suddenly, the lantern they carried was blown out, though no wind could have reached them. One boy cried out, certain something had seized his hand. They scrambled back to the entrance, bruised and panicked, swearing never to return. The cave soon became synonymous with the witch. Locals insisted that it was her dwelling place, a hollow where her voice still lingered. Some claimed the cave was a gate, a thin place between worlds where the boundary between the living and the dead was dangerously porous. Even visitors from outside Tennessee were drawn to the legend. Travelers passed through Robertson County and sought out the cave, eager to hear what the locals described. Some claimed they heard nothing. Others returned shaken, pale, insisting that they had heard whispers just beyond the reach of their lanterns. By the 1880s, the legend had become so deeply entrenched that it caught the attention of Martin Van Buren Ingram, a newspaperman from nearby Springfield. Ingram spent years gathering affidavits, interviewing surviving descendants, and compiling every scrap of lore he could uncover. In 1894, he published an authenticated history of the Bell Witch of Tennessee. The skeptics dismissed it all as coincidence, but those who believed in the witch's return pointed to the small, inexplicable tragedies as proof. She had not come back to kill, they said. She had come back to watch. And still, the cave remained the locus of fear. As the 20th century moved on, the Bell Witch Cave became a magnet for the curious. Adventurers, tourists, even researchers came to explore its depths. Some came away scoffing, but others left pale and shaken. Many insisted that once inside, one could hear breathing that was not one's own. The Bell Witch had passed into history, but her presence remained tethered to that land, to that cave, to the soil where John Bell lay. And so the question persisted, was she a ghost, a demon, or something older still? A curse passed down through generations, perhaps not even tied to the Bells alone, but to the land itself? Some researchers noted that long before settlers arrived, indigenous peoples considered the area sacred and dangerous. Did the Bell Witch simply inherit an older, darker spirit, or was she something entirely new, born of hatred, vengeance, and fear? The 20th century had no answers, only the whispers, the echoes, and the ever-present fear that the prophecy was not finished. For though she had returned in 1935, the witch had never promised it would be her last appearance. Some believe she is still there, waiting in the cave, in the fields, in the rustling trees along the Red River, watching, whispering, waiting. The Hex of the Bell Witch Part 5, The Spirit That Will Not Die. The decades after 1935 did not end the Bell Witch legend. If anything, the approach of the modern age seemed only to amplify it. America was entering a century of radio, cinema, and television, mediums hungry for strange tales. And in Adams, Tennessee, the story of a vengeful spirit, a curse whispered into the soil itself, was too powerful to ignore. Locals spoke with a kind of reluctant pride. They would warn visitors away from the cave, shaking their heads, yet their eyes carried a certain light, because the Bell Witch had made their town immortal. The legend was a warning, yes, but also a bond, tying them to their ancestors, to the very land beneath their feet. By the 1950s, the Bell Witch Cave had become both a place of fear and fascination. Teenagers dared each other to spend nights there. Some returned, laughing nervously, swearing they heard nothing. Others came back shaken, their bravado broken. One young man told reporters that while sitting in the dark, he felt cold fingers brush his neck, though no one else was there. Another girl insisted she heard her own name whispered from the stone walls, though her friends heard only silence. Accounts like these were not confined to restless teenagers. Farmers in the surrounding countryside claimed that their livestock sometimes refused to graze near the old Bell land. Horses would rear and snort, refusing to step forward. Dogs would howl, hackles raised, at seemingly empty air. These stories never reached the newspapers, but they passed from neighbor to neighbor, keeping the witch alive in memory. In the 1960s, as paranormal research began to creep into mainstream curiosity, the Bell Witch story attracted more formal attention. Amateur investigators brought tape recorders into the cave, leaving them overnight. When they returned, some claimed to find hours of static interrupted by faint voices. "Leave," one voice allegedly whispered. Another tape, according to its owner, captured what sounded like laughter, high-pitched mocking, echoing far away. Skeptics dismissed the findings as interference, but believers knew better. Meanwhile, the written accounts continued to circulate. Martin Van Buren Ingram's 1894 volume was still in print, passed among readers who devoured its chilling details. Other writers added to the lore, embellishing, speculating, piecing together fragments of history into narrative. But the more people investigated, the less certain the truth became. Was the witch a genuine supernatural entity? A poltergeist fueled by the energy of a family in turmoil? Or an elaborate tale inflated across generations until fiction and fact became inseparable? Yet according to official records of local families, not all the strange events could be explained away. One farmer in 1965 claimed to see a woman in old-fashioned dress standing near the Bell Witch Cave at dawn. Thinking she was a lost traveler, he approached, calling out to her. The figure turned, and he saw that her face was obscured, as though covered by shadow despite the rising sun. She vanished before his eyes. Another resident reported waking in the night to find her bedroom door opening slowly. Assuming it was her husband, she called out, but no answer came. The door stopped halfway, and she heard the unmistakable sound of someone breathing. When she rose to check, the hallway was empty. Her husband had been asleep beside her the entire time. These accounts were rarely reported to newspapers. The locals did not seek attention. They knew better than to mock the witch with publicity. The Bell Witch, they said, punished those who made light of her. The 1970s brought a wave of interest from outside Tennessee. Folklorists, journalists, and paranormal enthusiasts descended on Adams, seeking the truth. Some were disappointed, finding only a sleepy town and a damp cave. Others left convinced they had brushed against something far older than a mere ghost story. One notable visitor was anthropologist Dr. Charles Bailey, who argued that the Bell Witch legend bore striking resemblance to older tales of malevolent spirits in Appalachian folklore. Spirits that mocked, tormented, and attached themselves to particular families. Bailey noted that indigenous peoples had long spoken of trickster spirits haunting certain areas of Middle Tennessee. Was the Bell Witch a continuation of this deeper current, her story simply grafted onto the Bell's misfortune? Or was it possible, as some whispered, that the Bell family had stumbled upon a site of ancient power, drawing a presence that had been there long before white settlers arrived? But what happened next defies logic. In 1973, a local journalist claimed to have uncovered a document hidden in county archives. The document, allegedly from the early 1820s, described testimony not included in Ingram's book. It told of a visitor to the Bell home who claimed to see John Bell speaking quietly to himself, as if negotiating with an unseen presence. According to the testimony, Bell repeated the words, "I accept, spare them, take me." The document's authenticity was questioned, and some historians believe it was a forgery inserted later to deepen the drama. Yet if real, it suggested something chilling. That Bell himself had struck a bargain with the witch, and his death was the payment. The Bell Witch legend did not fade in the 20th century. It grew. By the 1980s, television crews arrived, documentaries aired, casting eerie spotlights on the cave, replaying old testimonies. Paranormal groups brought more sophisticated equipment, from electromagnetic detectors to night vision cameras. They left with hours of footage, often inconclusive, but always strange. Sudden drops in temperature, unexplained voices caught on tape, shadows flitting across stone walls. Meanwhile, the cave's owner began offering tours. The Bell Witch Cave became both a historical site and a tourist attraction. Visitors descended into its cool passages, shivering as guides told them of the witch's torments. Some laughed it off. Others emerged pale, claiming to feel watched the entire time. But not all who entered left unchanged. In 1987, a man visiting from Kentucky scoffed at the stories, declaring loudly that the witch was nothing more than a hoax. Later that evening, as he drove home, his car reportedly stalled on a deserted road. He claimed to hear something clawing at the doors, though no marks were found afterward. Terrified, he fled on foot, abandoning his vehicle until daylight. he never returned to Adams. Some believe the truth was buried forever, hidden beneath layers of folklore and fear. Others insist the witch remains active, her power extending beyond Tennessee, touching anyone who dares to mock her story. By the 1990s, the Bell Witch had become a fixture in American paranormal lore, ranking alongside Salem's witches, New England vampires, and haunted battlefields. The tale was retold in books, films, and documentaries, each version embellished, altered, reshaped. Yet at the core remained the same chilling truth: a family destroyed, a patriarch poisoned, a voice from the darkness that mocked and tormented. And still, the cave draws visitors. They report whispers, cold drafts, shadows. Some leave trinkets behind, coins, ribbons, offerings of respect, as though to appease the unseen force. The cave walls bear scratches, initials carved by those seeking to mark their passage through the witch's lair. What is the Bell Witch? A spirit? A demon? A curse tied to the land? Or the collective fear of a community, crystallized into a legend that refuses to die? Whatever she is, she endures, and as long as people whisper her name, as long as footsteps echo in the cave, the Bell Witch will never be at rest. The Hex of the Bell Witch Part 6, A Curse Without End. The Bell Witch legend did not vanish with the close of the 20th century. If anything, it grew stronger, fueled by modern fascination with the paranormal and an insatiable hunger for the macabre. What had once been a whispered story passed down in farmhouses became a global phenomenon, carried on television waves, printed in countless volumes, and adapted into films. But despite all the retellings, the heart of the tale remains the same. A family undone by a force they could not see, a curse spoken into existence, and a spirit that never allowed the dead to rest in peace. In the early 2000s, the Bell Witch Cave once again became a focal point for seekers of the unknown. Paranormal investigators arrived with cameras, infrared thermometers, and audio devices. They spoke of sudden battery drains, as if an unseen hand drew energy from their equipment. Some left with nothing more than grainy footage of empty tunnels. Others swore they caught glimpses of pale figures standing just beyond the light. One widely circulated account tells of a group who ventured into the cave in 2006. Deep in the passage, they asked aloud, "Who are you?" A sharp knock echoed from the stone wall, though no one touched it. When they asked, "What do you want?" a low moan filled the chamber. The audio was captured on tape, replayed, analyzed. Skeptics dismissed it as echoes or shifting stone. Believers heard the witch herself. But the Bell Witch legend is not confined to the cave alone. Reports of strange happenings continue to arise across Robertson County. Residents speak of hearing their names whispered at night. Farmers still find livestock behaving erratically. A woman living near the old Bell Farm swore she woke to see a shadow standing at the foot of her bed, pointing toward the river. When she screamed, the figure dissolved into air. And so the question persists: what truly haunts Adams, Tennessee? According to official records, the death of John Bell remains a historical mystery. The cause was listed as poisoning, though no definitive evidence was ever found of who or what was responsible. His death remains one of the few cases in American history where supernatural forces were openly blamed for a man's demise. That fact alone has cemented the Bell Witch into legend. Yet historians and skeptics offer competing explanations. Some argue that John Bell suffered from a neurological disorder, perhaps Lou Gehrig's disease, his symptoms mistaken for a curse. Others suggest the voice of the witch was the work of ventriloquism or hysteria, a trick of suggestion magnified by fear. Still others believe Richard Powell, Betsy's eventual husband, orchestrated parts of the haunting to drive away her former fiancé. But even if these theories explain portions of the legend, they cannot account for every detail. How did so many independent witnesses describe the same voice, the same phenomena? How could objects move, blows strike, and conversations unfold with no visible speaker? The line between folklore and fact blurs, but the unanswered questions remain like splinters in history. Some believe the Bell Witch was never a ghost at all, but a demon. Ministers in the 1800s declared her a servant of Satan, sent to test the faithful. Modern demonologists echo this theory, pointing to the mocking tone, the violent assaults, the way the witch seemed to delight in torment. They note that unlike traditional hauntings, the witch was not tied to one location. She followed the bells wherever they went, proving she was more than a mere echo of the dead. Others believe she was a thought form, a manifestation of collective fear. According to this theory, the Bells' struggles, their secrets, and the pressure of their community gave birth to something that fed on belief. The more people feared her, the stronger she became. If true, then the Bell Witch is not merely history. She is alive as long as people continue to tell her story. And tell it they do. The Bell Witch has seeped into American culture. Plays have been staged about her. Novels have been written, twisting her story into new shapes. In 1999, the Hollywood film The Blair Witch Project drew inspiration from her legend, though the setting was changed. Documentaries have aired across countless networks. Paranormal podcasts dissect her story. YouTube channels chase her echoes. Yet with every retelling comes a warning. For the witch punishes those who mock her. Guides at the cave caution visitors never to challenge the spirit. Don't call her name 3 times, they say. Don't demand proof. Don't insult her. Too many who scoffed have left with stories of accidents, nightmares, or sudden illness. Coincidence, perhaps, but those who know the legend choose not to risk it. Some say the witch has expanded beyond Adams, Tennessee. There are reports of travelers leaving the cave and carrying something with them. A man from Ohio claimed that after visiting, his house became plagued by unexplained knocks and whispers. A woman from Georgia swore that she saw a shadow following her car all the way home. Whether these are products of fear or genuine extensions of the witch's power, no one can say, but what is undeniable is that the Bell Witch remains one of America's most documented hauntings. From the sworn testimonies of 19th century farmers to the shaky video footage of modern investigators, the story refuses to die. It evolves, twists, and adapts, but at its core it is still the same. A spirit that speaks, that mocks, that torments, and that never allows the living to forget the dead. The Bell Witch Cave stands as her shrine. Visitors still leave offerings. Coins, crosses, even small toys. Perhaps they believe the witch can be appeased. Perhaps they hope to ward off her attention. The cave accepts all, but returns nothing except the steady whisper of air and the echo of water dripping in the dark. Some nights locals say you can stand at the mouth of the cave and hear faint laughter carried on the breeze. Other nights a voice calls out clear as a bell, "I am here." And so we are left with questions that have no answers. Was John Bell poisoned by human hands, or by something no doctor could cure? Was Betsy Bell tormented by a cruel suitor, or by a spirit jealous of her happiness? Was the witch a demon, a ghost, or the very land itself, rising in anger against those who disturbed it? Perhaps we will never know. Perhaps that is the point. For legends endure not because they are solved, but because they remain mysteries. But one truth is certain. The Bell Witch never died. She lingers still, in the cave, in the fields, in the whispered stories passed from parent to child. And if the accounts are true, she still answers when called. Some believe the truth was buried forever. Others believe the witch is waiting for her moment to return, just as she promised she would. And when she does, there will be no mistaking her voice, a voice from the shadows, a voice that mocks, a voice that curses, the voice of the Bell Witch.